empty your mind. Be formed like water. Now water can flow or it can crash.
At 128 pounds, a skinny immigrant stepped off the boat in 1959 America with nothing but a heretical idea. What if everything martial arts taught about strength was wrong? Bruce Lee's physical training experiments would transform him from a frail teenager to a superhuman fighter through a dangerous gamble on barbells, isometrics, and plyometrics that martial arts purists called blasphemy. Here's how Bruce Lee's systematic approach to physical training made him a legendary martial artist, but at a cost that would claim his life at just 32 years old. The Skinny Immigrant Rebels. A 128-pound teenager stood in San Francisco, 1959, watching American fighters train with barbells and thinking the unthinkable. Bruce Lee had studied Wing Chun since age 13 under the legendary Yip Man, mastering forms and techniques that took others decades to learn. But tradition whispered that weights would slow him down, make him muscle-bound and clumsy. Every martial arts master in Hong Kong said the same thing. Real fighters don't need barbells. Lee did the opposite. While teaching martial arts classes in Seattle and Oakland, he met bodybuilders Alan Joe and James Lee, who introduced him to iron, to progressive overload, to the idea that functional strength could explode from systematic resistance training. Lee started keeping training logs, meticulous notebooks filled with exercises, weights, repetitions, and rest periods. He wasn't just working out, he was conducting experiments with himself as the sole test subject. The martial arts community thought he'd lost his mind. Lee tracked how his 1-inch punch velocity changed as his bench press climbed from 125 pounds to 140, then 160. Each entry in his notebook asked the same question: does this make me a better martial artist? By 1960, Lee had designed his first barbell routine: clean and presses, squats, bench presses, rows. Nothing fancy, nothing traditional. Just compound movements that recruited multiple muscle groups simultaneously, building unified body tension that would later define his fighting style. His friends watched him squat 95 pounds for 12 reps, wondering if this heresy would destroy his martial arts career or revolutionize it. But within a year, something remarkable happened. Lee's kicks gained height. His punches gained velocity. The barbells hadn't slowed him down. They'd turned him into something unprecedented. His frame, once rail-thin, now carried functional muscle that translated directly to combat power. But this was just the beginning. The training logs showed progress, but they also showed gaps. Barbells built force, but what about tendon strength? What about explosive power? What about the ability to generate maximum effort instantaneously? The next experiments would take him even further from tradition and closer to the edge. Barbell heresy unleashed. By 1965, Bruce Lee had committed fully to his barbell experiments. His frame now carried 135 pounds of lean, functional muscle. But Lee wasn't interested in bodybuilding aesthetics. He wanted power that translated directly to combat effectiveness. He refined his routine down to 6 essential movements, performed 3 times per week for exactly 20 minutes. No wasted motion. Pure efficiency. Squats became his obsession. Lee performed 2 sets of 12 repetitions, never pausing at the bottom, just continuous motion, immediately rising from the deepest position. This trained his legs to generate explosive force from disadvantaged positions, exactly like springing up from a low fighting stance. His squat weight climbed from 95 pounds to 200, then 300, eventually reaching over 400 pounds. A 135-pound man squatting 400 pounds. The clean and press became Lee's signature lift. This movement combined explosive pulling power with overhead pressing strength. Grabbing a barbell from the floor, yanking it to shoulder height in one fluid motion, then driving it overhead. Lee performed this with 0 rest between repetitions. The moment the bar touched down, he'd explode back up again, turning a strength exercise into cardio torture. His training notes describe lungs burning, heart pounding at 160 beats per minute, muscles flooded with lactic acid, yet continuing to press overhead. Lee didn't just lift heavy. He incorporated breathing squats. high repetition squats with challenging weight designed to push his cardiovascular system to the edge of oxygen deprivation. Lee would load 135 to 185 pounds and squat for 20 continuous repetitions, breathing deeply between each rep, his face turning purple from exertion. This wasn't just leg training, it was systematic metabolic overload. The bench press became another experiment. Lee discovered that traditional bodybuilding-style pressing didn't transfer well to punching power. So he modified the technique, using 70% of his maximum weight, but exploding the bar upward as violently as possible. Speed bench. The bar would fly up so fast it nearly left his hands at the top. His chest strength skyrocketed, from benching 125 pounds to 340 pounds. But more importantly, his punch velocity increased proportionally. Lee experimented with pyramid training on deadlifts. He'd start with 135 pounds and perform a set, then immediately add weight 185, 225, 275 with minimal rest. By the final set, his grip was failing. His lower back was trembling. He was barely able to stand upright after completing the lift. His training partners remember him collapsing on the gym floor afterward, completely spent. The barbell heresy was working. Lee's 1-inch punch, delivered from just 1 inch away, could knock a man backward 6 feet and was measured at 120 miles per hour. His 2-finger push-ups became legendary. But Lee's training logs posed new questions. Could he build even more explosive power? Could he strengthen his tendons beyond what barbells could provide? The answer would come from an even more controversial training method: isometric torture forge. What happens when you push against an unmovable object with every ounce of strength you possess for 12 seconds straight? Bruce Lee wanted to find out. By the mid-1960s, Lee had discovered isometric training, exercises where muscles contract maximally without any movement occurring. He read about Olympic lifters using isometrics to break through strength plateaus and became fascinated. Traditional weight training involved moving resistance through a range of motion, but isometrics allowed him to generate 100% maximum effort at specific joint angles. For a martial artist, this was transformative. Combat rarely happens at optimal leverage positions. You need strength at every conceivable angle. Lee designed a brutal 8-exercise isometric routine, performed 2 to 3 times weekly. He'd set a barbell in a power rack at a fixed position, immovable, and push or pull against it with absolute maximum effort for 6 to 12 seconds. Every muscle fiber contracting simultaneously. Every nerve pathway firing at maximum capacity. No movement, just pure grinding force. The press lockout became his signature isometric. Lying on a bench, he'd position the barbell 3 inches below full lockout and press upward with everything he had. Jaw clenched, veins bulging, entire body rigid with tension, pressing against that immovable bar for 10 seconds. This single exercise made him a legendary martial artist by teaching his nervous system to recruit every available muscle fiber on demand. Lee incorporated isometric squats from parallel position, deadlift positions, rowing positions, and shoulder raises. Each exercise targeted a specific angle where combat might require explosive force. The parallel squat hold strengthened exactly the position from which he'd launch his devastating kicks. The deadlift hold at knee height built grip strength capable of crushing. Witnesses claimed Lee could crack walnuts between his fingers, and his custom-made grip training devices would literally bend from the pressure he applied. The 1-finger push-up became Lee's calling card, demonstrating insane tendon strength. He'd balance his entire body weight on a single finger and knock out repetitions. This was the result of systematic isometric finger training, pressing against resistance bands and bars with individual fingers until the tendons became like steel cables. But isometrics had a dark side. The constant maximum effort contractions placed enormous stress on connective tissue. Lee's training notes mention elbow pain, wrist soreness, and the constant risk of tendon strain. Isometrics built strength faster than tendons could adapt. One wrong movement during a maximum isometric contraction, and tendons could snap. Yet Lee pushed harder. He incorporated high-tension training, attempting to bend steel bars, roll up frying pans, all feats of static strength. His forearms grew thick and corded. His grip became legendary. Chuck Norris remembers Lee squeezing his forearm during a conversation and being shocked by the crushing pressure. The combination of barbell training and isometrics had transformed Lee's physical training into something unprecedented. He'd built a body capable of generating explosive force from any position, at any angle, with maximum efficiency. But he still wasn't satisfied. His training logs posed new questions. How could he increase his movement speed? How could he train his body to explode faster than opponents could react? Plyometric explosions. Speed isn't built, it's detonated. Bruce Lee understood that maximum strength alone wouldn't make him a legendary martial artist. He needed explosive power, the ability to accelerate his body mass instantaneously, to deliver devastating strikes before opponents could even register movement. By 1967, Lee had discovered plyometrics, exercises that trained the nervous system's ability to generate rapid force through stretch reflex mechanisms. The dragon flag became his signature abdominal exercise. Lying on a bench, gripping the edges by his head, Lee would raise his entire body until only his shoulder blades touched the bench, creating a perfectly straight line from shoulders to toes. Then he'd drop his body quickly and reverse direction explosively at the bottom, 50 repetitions in a row. This trained his core to absorb and redirect force instantaneously. The exact mechanism behind his blinding fast direction changes during sparring. Lee modified traditional exercises into explosive variations. The speed bench press became his laboratory for upper body power development. Using 70% of his maximum weight, roughly 240 pounds, Lee would explode the barbell upwards so violently it would rise several inches off his hands at the top. Then he'd catch it, absorb the impact, and immediately reverse direction for another explosive rep. This trained his chest and arms to generate maximum acceleration, directly translating to punch velocity. Lee's training logs describe plyo pull-ups, explosive chin-ups performed so violently his hands would briefly leave the bar at the top. He'd grip the bar, pull explosively upward, release, clap his hands in midair, regrip, and immediately drop into another rep. This was neural system overload, teaching his body to recruit maximum muscle fiber in minimum time. The heavy bag became another plyometric tool. Lee would perform 1,000 kicks per session, side kicks, roundhouse kicks, hook kicks, each delivered with maximum speed and power. His training partners remember bags weighing 300 pounds splitting open from repeated impacts. The plyometric element came from Lee's technique. He'd chamber each kick, then explode through the target, allowing his leg to recoil rapidly and chamber again without pause. Chamber, explode, recoil, chamber. Continuous rhythmic detonation that trained his legs to generate force faster than conscious thought. Here's what made Bruce Lee's physical training approach to plyometrics truly dangerous. He combined everything simultaneously. His infamous crucible workout mixed plyometric exercises with strength exercises with cardio in non-stop 30-minute circuits. Pull-ups to muscle failure, exploding off the bar into clapping push-ups, rolling immediately into V-ups, lying flat, then simultaneously raising torso and legs to touch hands to toes, creating a V shape, then exploding back down. 30 minutes of this metabolic chaos performed in saunas to increase cardiovascular stress. Lee's training logs describe losing 15 pounds of water weight per session. He'd enter the sauna at 140 pounds and emerge at 125, completely dehydrated, muscles cramped, heart rate through the roof. This was systematic nervous system overload designed to push his body's capacity for generating explosive power under severe metabolic stress. Lee incorporated weighted shadow boxing, throwing 100 punches per series with dumbbells ranging from 1 pound to 10 pounds, then reversing the pyramid back down, 12 series, 1,200 punches with added resistance. This trained his fast-twitch muscle fibers to fire under load, building explosive power that would make his strikes impossibly fast when performed without weight. His reflexes reached almost superhuman levels. Lee could snatch a coin from someone's open palm and replace it with a different coin before they could close their fingers, 1/100th of a second reaction time. He could extinguish a candle with a punch from 3 feet away through displaced air pressure alone. These weren't tricks. They were the result of systematic plyometric neural training that had rewired his nervous system for explosive speed. But the plyometric experiments came with mounting warnings. Lee's training notes mention joint soreness, particularly in knees and elbows. The constant explosive movements placed enormous stress on connective tissue. Every bag-splitting kick was a calculated gamble that his joints could withstand forces they weren't designed to handle. But instead of stopping, Lee searched for more training methods. Circuit crucible chaos. By 1970, Lee had discovered circuit training, specifically peripheral heart action training that he read about in Iron Man magazine. The concept was revolutionary. Instead of isolating muscle groups, perform full-body circuits that keep blood circulating throughout the entire body. For a martial artist, this was perfect. Combat doesn't respect muscle groups. You need your entire body firing simultaneously, round after round. Lee's circuit routines looked like controlled chaos. He'd string together 10 to 12 exercises with zero rest between them, moving from upper body to lower body to core in rapid succession. Pull-ups to absolute muscle failure. The moment his grip gave out, he'd drop from the bar and immediately transition into leg raises. Hanging from the same bar, raising his legs to touch the bar with his toes, 25 repetitions. Then straight into standing calf raises, 50 repetitions. Then shadow boxing for 3 minutes at maximum intensity. Then reverse curls. Then dumbbell circles. Then wrist rollers. Then back to pull-ups. No rest, not even to breathe properly. A complete circuit took 30 to 45 minutes, performed 3 to 4 times per week. His heart rate would climb to 180 beats per minute and stay there for the entire session. This was systematic cardiovascular overload designed to teach his body to clear lactic acid while maintaining explosive power output, exactly what combat demands. Here's what made him a legendary martial artist through circuit training. Lee performed these circuits in extreme heat. He'd turn his home gym into a sauna or wear plastic suits that trapped body heat, deliberately inducing dehydration and thermal stress. The logic was brutal but effective. If he could maintain power output while severely dehydrated and overheated, normal fighting conditions would feel easy by comparison. His training partners described sessions where Lee would emerge from the circuit drenched in sweat, having lost those 15 pounds of water weight, his skin pale from blood redirection, barely able to stand. Yet he'd immediately go into stretching routines or martial arts technique work. Lee incorporated compound movements into circuits specifically chosen for martial arts transfer. The good morning exercise built posterior chain strength necessary for powerful kicks. Barbell pullovers expanded his ribcage and taught him to breathe deeply under load. Behind-the-neck presses built shoulder strength in the exact position where he'd need to generate power for back fists and hammer strikes. The crucible workout became Lee's ultimate test. 30 minutes nonstop, shadow boxing with light weights, transitioning into pull-ups, dropping into push-ups, rolling into leg raises, exploding into burpees, shifting into squats, flowing into dumbbell rows, pressing overhead, curling, extending, never stopping. Lee's resting heart rate dropped to 32 beats per minute, lower than most elite endurance athletes. His VO2 max reached levels comparable to Olympic marathon runners. Yet he weighed 135 to 140 pounds and was built like a sprinter. The circuit training had transformed his cardiovascular system into something unprecedented, the efficiency of an endurance athlete combined with the explosive power of a sprinter. But this metabolic extremism came with warnings his body was sending. Lee's training logs from 1971 to 1972 mentioned chronic fatigue, difficulty recovering between sessions, and persistent soreness that wouldn't resolve. Yet he pushed harder. He incorporated the circuit philosophy into his martial arts training, creating non-stop sparring sessions that mixed techniques, speeds, and intensities without rest. 3-minute rounds against fresh opponents who rotated in every round. Lee would fight for 30 to 45 minutes straight while his opponents tagged in and out, each one fresh, while Lee never stopped. Chuck Norris described it as fighting a machine. No matter how tired Lee appeared, he'd never slow down. The circuit training had built an engine that simply refused to quit. But Lee's body was being pushed toward a precipice. Running gauntlet risks. Lee had also caught the jogging craze sweeping America and immediately asked, How can I make this relevant to martial arts? Steady-state jogging built endurance, but combat isn't steady state. It's explosive bursts followed by brief recovery, followed by more explosions, all at unpredictable intervals. So Lee modified traditional running into something far more challenging: fartlek training. Fartlek, Swedish for speed play, involved running 2 to 4 miles but varying pace unpredictably throughout. Lee would jog at conversational pace for 2 minutes, then suddenly explode into an all-out sprint for 30 seconds, then drop back to jogging, then sprint up a hill, then slow to a walk, then sprint again. No pattern, no predictable intervals, just constant variation that kept his cardiovascular system guessing. This directly mimicked fighting. You're moving at medium intensity, reading your opponent, then suddenly you see an opening and explode with maximum power, then recover while circling, then explode again. Lee's fartlek runs trained his body to generate maximum effort from a non-rested state, the exact condition where most fighters gas out. Lee didn't just run. He made running a full-body workout using heavy hands, carrying light dumbbells or wearing ankle weights during runs. Picture running 4 miles at varying speeds while holding 5-pound dumbbells, periodically throwing punches while maintaining running pace. This trained his body to maintain cardiovascular output while simultaneously generating upper body power, exactly like fighting. Lee incorporated progressive overload into running just like weightlifting. His training logs show systematic increases: 2 miles at 8-minute pace, 2 miles at 7:30 pace, 3 miles at 8-minute pace, 3 miles with sprints, 4 miles with heavy hands. His running routes became legendary. Lee would run the hills of Hong Kong during film shoots, sprinting up inclines that left his training partners gasping, then immediately transitioning into technique work at the top. The combination of altitude, heat, and exercise created hypoxic conditions that trained his body to function efficiently with limited oxygen. But there was a dark side to Bruce Lee's physical training obsession. The running was excessive. Training logs from 1972 to 1973 show Lee running 6 days per week, often twice daily, in addition to weight training, circuit training, martial arts training, and film choreography rehearsals. The cumulative volume was destroying his recovery capacity. Lee's lower back began showing signs of stress. The constant impact from running, combined with spinal loading from squats and deadlifts, created chronic inflammation. His training notes mention increasing back pain, stiffness upon waking, and difficulty maintaining certain positions. Yet he kept running. His resting heart rate dropped to 32 beats per minute, impressive but also a warning sign. The running also accelerated his already extreme leanness. Lee's body fat percentage hovered around 4 to 6% during his peak years, dropping to near 1% by 1973. At that level, the body begins consuming muscle tissue for energy because there's simply no fat left to burn. Every run was eating into his hard-earned muscle mass. He looked incredibly defined, but he was also consuming himself. Lee's doctors expressed concern about overtraining syndrome, chronic fatigue, hormonal imbalance, immune suppression, and elevated injury risk. The warning signs were there: persistent soreness, difficulty sleeping despite exhaustion, irritability, and declining performance. But Lee interpreted these symptoms as signs he needed to train harder, not rest more. Stretching to breaking point. And one area where training needed to be constant was flexibility. Flexibility isn't just about touching your toes, it's about generating power through impossible ranges of motion. Bruce Lee understood this better than any athlete of his era. By 1971, Lee had developed a stretching routine so extreme, it bordered on self-torture, yet it created the mobility that made him a legendary martial artist. His famous high kicks, hitting opponents in the head from standing distance, required flexibility that most athletes never achieve. But Lee wasn't satisfied with passive flexibility. He wanted active flexibility, the ability to generate maximum power at a full range of motion. Lee constructed a custom stretching device called the rack that forced his legs into split positions beyond what his natural flexibility allowed, then held them there for 30 to 45 minutes. Half an hour of sustained stretch, his adductors and hip flexors screaming in protest while he read books or watched television as if nothing was happening. This systematic overload of his connective tissue created flexibility that appeared superhuman. Lee performed weighted stretches, holding dumbbells while in stretched positions to increase load on his joints and tendons. Picture holding a full side split while gripping 10-pound dumbbells and performing shoulder presses. The combination of maximum flexibility position plus loaded movement created multiplanar strength that traditional training couldn't touch. Lee also discovered yoga before it became mainstream in America, incorporating poses and flows that built functional flexibility. Not gentle, restorative yoga. Lee practiced dynamic yoga, moving rapidly between poses. Sun salutations performed explosively. Warrior poses held with added weights. Downward dog transitioning into explosive push-ups. His stretching philosophy centered on one principle: if you can generate power at the full range of motion, you're untouchable. Lee could throw a head-high kick from standing with zero telegraphing movement because his hip flexibility allowed his leg to go from chamber position to full extension instantly. Traditional martial artists needed to shift their weight, wind up, and then kick. Lee just exploded from standing. Lee's students described flexibility sessions that looked like medieval torture. Full splits with a training partner pressing down on his shoulders, adding additional depth to an already maximal stretch. Front splits transitioning into middle splits, transitioning into over splits, where his legs extended beyond 180 degrees. Straddle stretches where he'd lean forward until his chest touched the ground between his legs. The active flexibility component was even more intense. Lee would chamber a kick at maximum height, then perform a full range of motion squat on the supporting leg while holding the kick, essentially doing one-leg squats while maintaining a split position in the air. This trained his body to maintain power output while in mechanically disadvantageous positions. But the extreme flexibility came with accumulating damage. Lee's training logs mention increasing back pain, particularly in the lower lumbar region. The combination of heavy squats, deadlifts, and extreme stretching was creating instability in his spine, creating a legend, yet causing his downfall. Bruce Lee's body had become something unprecedented. At 5 feet 7 inches and 135 pounds, Lee could kick a 6-foot-tall opponent in the head with no telegraphing movement. He could perform full splits in any direction. He could kick so high that his foot would literally rise above his own head height. The flexibility had made him a legendary martial artist by removing physical limitations that constrained normal fighters. Yet by 1973, the warning signs were everywhere. Lee's body fat had dropped to near 1%, so low that essential physiological functions were compromised. His resting heart rate was 32 beats per minute. He suffered chronic back pain. He experienced frequent headaches. His immune system was suppressed from constant training stress. The cumulative effect of barbell training, isometrics, plyometrics, circuits, running, and stretching, all performed at maximum intensity all the time, was consuming him. Then, suddenly, on July 20th, 1973, Bruce Lee died of cerebral edema at age 32. The official cause remains debated, but the underlying reality is clear. His body had been pushed beyond sustainable limits. The physical training that made him a legendary martial artist had also destroyed the very vehicle that housed his genius. Which training method do you think pushed him over the edge? The 400-pound squats, isometric torture, or non-stop circuits? Drop your theory below. Thanks for watching. Catch you in the next one.